Welcome to the Event Pro Show, your ultimate guide to the world of corporate events. Whether you're a corporate event planner, experiential marketing pro, producer, technician, or anyone involved in creating exceptional events, this podcast is your go-to resource for valuable insights, expert tips, and inspiring stories from the industry's leading professionals.
Well, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Event Pro Show. I am your host, Seth Mackey. I'm the CEO of LEMG. We're an event production company based in Charlotte, North Carolina. We travel all over the country producing corporate events, mainly for meeting planners. And today's guest is someone that I met a few years ago. I've been very interested in his day-to-day. Ned has a really cool job. Ned, I'm going to read your bio here. Sure. Ned Blair, sales director with Visit Charlotte and a seasoned hospitality and meetings professional with more than 2 decades of experience helping planners create impactful events and drive attendance in one of the fastest growing destinations in the country. Ned has built his career around strong partnerships between planners, hotels, and venues. And he's also worked closely with city, state, and federal initiatives to advance tourism, economic development, and large-scale event strategy, positioning Charlotte as a dynamic, accessible city where events truly thrive. Ned Blair, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Are you sure you're talking about Ned Blair with that? That was pretty lofty there.
This is you, man. I'm just reading. This is you. This is what you do.
Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate you being here. Not only, I'm part of the greater Charlotte Metro. It's always where we come back to, every event that we produce, it's always based or measured against the benchmark of Charlotte, so if we're in Dallas, we're always like thinking, based on what we know from Charlotte, that kind of a thing. It's home. So, and it's a great place to work and live and play. It's been a great place for my family. But I was very interested always, like since I met you, is you're the director of sales for the CVB in Charlotte, Visit Charlotte, which is a very unique position as a really fast growing city. But my first question for you is, how did you get your start in events and then eventually working with the city of Charlotte? What was that? How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, this is a very interesting situation because, I have a degree in outdoor recreation. I knew nothing about the hospitality industry other than playing in the woods, basically, mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. And I started off my career at a place called Mountain Lake Hotel, which is now known as Mountain Lake Lodge. If you've ever seen the movie Dirty Dancing, that big stone hotel in the movie, that's Mountain Lake Lodge. Yeah, that's it.
Claim to fame.
And believe it or not, I was recreation director there. I was in the recreation department of that property. And the general manager came to me when I was, maybe I was 2 years out of college and said, Ned, you're doing a great job. Seasonal property, because it was in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. Mm-hmm. And he said, but we're going to have to furlough you until the coming spring. Well, I really didn't know what to do. So one of the things that I looked at was the property. I fell in love with the property. I fell in love with the general manager there was fantastic. So I actually wrote a proposal and I created an outside sales position and a team building program for that resort. And they accepted it. So that was ultimately my first sell in the industry as I sold
yourself. You sold yourself. You
That's
bet
right.
on yourself. That's awesome.
So I worked through there. And when I left, I was the interim director of sales. So in 2000, I moved from Mountain Lake Hotel into the state of Delaware. And while in the state of Delaware, I had the privilege of managing and directing sales efforts for resort hotels, convention hotels. I worked for casino property as their director of hotel sales. And then first CVB job I ever experienced was in the state of Delaware. And this is the world that I live in today, the convention and visitor bureau world. And, the hospitality industry is so diverse and complex that there's so many different layers of what you can do. And as soon as I got into the CVB world, I was like, this is it. This is my sweet spot. But as I continued to grow, and before I left the state of Delaware to come to Charlotte, I had the opportunity to work for Hyatt Hotels and Resorts. That was a wonderful experience, opened up a lot of great development in my career. And then right before I moved to Charlotte, I was actually the tourism development leader for meetings and conventions for the state of Delaware, and I worked for the state tourism office. So my journey up to this point consists of hotels, casino, resort, convention and visitor bureau, and even a state tourism office. When I moved to the city of Charlotte in 2012, I've had the privilege of really growing within Visit Charlotte and the Charlotte Regional Visitors Authority. And today I do have the privilege of being the director of sales. I get the opportunity to coach 24 amazing sales professionals, and this is where I plan on finishing my career. As you've mentioned in our conversation at the beginning, this destination is a destination on the rise, and it's been so much fun to be a part of it. And I really look forward to watching it continue to grow and being a part of that growth.
I love that. I love that you found what you want to be your forever job, and you guys are doing amazing work. Clearly, I've lived here for the past almost 8 years, but I've been visiting since, I don't know, 20 years back. And the transformation just as a city has been incredible to watch.
Absolutely.
And then how it's represented and sold as a destination has really elevated, especially in the last decade or so. But on that note, who are your competitors as the city of Charlotte as a destination?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we bucket our competitors really into two different buckets, right? The first bucket is our direct competitors, and then the second bucket is our indirect competitors. So we compete with all different types of destinations, regardless of their size or what their capabilities are. So our direct competitors are destinations like Baltimore, Austin, Tampa. Those would be Columbus. Those would be direct competitors. Indirect competitors would be Orlando, Las Vegas, Chicago, New York, those big metropolitan cities or destinations that can host really, really mega events. So what is the definition of a direct competitor? A direct competitor is a destination that requires similar package and infrastructure in order to accommodate a citywide event to Charlotte, right? So let's say there's a major meeting and convention that we're looking at. We know it's going to take the Charlotte Convention Center, some of our other facilities in the area, along with, say, 10 meeting convention hotels or general hotels in the area to accommodate, right? So Baltimore and Austin and Tampa, they would require similar makeup in order to make that happen, right? So that's a direct competitor. We know that when we're competing with them, they're having to build a similar, if not close to the same package that we would need to build in order to win the business. An indirect competitor would be a destination that can not only accommodate what I just described as a citywide opportunity, but oftentimes multiple Charlotte citywide opportunities at the same time. So my favorite example to give is Las Vegas, right? So the Venetian Palazzo, this is one hotel in Las Vegas. That hotel alone has more guest rooms and more meeting space than the city of Charlotte does, right? So you have a meeting planner that can say, look, I can sign one contract and put all my business into this one hotel, or I can go to Charlotte, own the city, which is a positive, right? Own the city, but I'm going to have to sign a convention center contract and 10 to 12 different hotel agreements in order to accomplish the same goal, right? So that's where we'll compete with an indirect competitor.
And I imagine your team, though, works on making that process as smooth as possible, though.
Absolutely.
For an incoming event.
Yeah, and that's our sweet spot, right? I mean, that's our job. Our job is to be the dot connector, right?
Right.
So a lot of people don't utilize convention and visitor bureaus as much as they probably could or should. And a lot of people don't realize we're a free service, right? There's no catch. We are a free service. So, meeting planners, we have a lot of planners that do take advantage of our services, but there's also a lot of planners that either aren't aware of our services or don't take advantage of those services. So when you utilize your destination experts like Visit Charlotte, you are unlocking the opportunity to not just connect with the right people and make things more seamless, as you described in just now, but also other assets and resources that they could take advantage of.
Love it, love it. And I'm going to back up just a minute. I have more
Sure.
questions about your specific job. But how do you think you have experience with connecting with state initiatives, both in your old job and then now you network a lot throughout the state. But how would you say events play a role in a region's economic development strategy? As far as the states, why is it important, and how does it play a role in that impact?
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of people don't really understand the true economic impact that the tourism industry has. I've got a couple things actually, because this is something I want to make sure I get right. But, tourism in general is a major economic driver for Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. In fact, Mecklenburg County leads the state of North Carolina in generating 17% of our overall tourism spending, right? So we
Wow.
lead the state in tourism spending. That's about $9.1 billion annually that's driven in tourism. That's a huge economic number. The other thing that I think is important to talk about when you were talking about the economic impact and development in general, 1 out of every 9 people that live in Mecklenburg County are employed in the hospitality industry,
So
making
that's amazing.
tourism.
I've heard this
Yeah,
stat before, and I can't wrap
yeah,
my mind around it. It's such a big impact on this area, and probably a lot of areas that have a lot of tourism. But that's insane. That's an
yeah.
insane number.
Well, and I mean, and you think about, what are we doing for economic? What is development? What is business development? And that's driving quality of life, industry to market, and job creation, right? Which in turn drives revenue, which people spend more money, so forth and
Hmm.
so on, right? Well, the tourism industry is a huge part of that, right? Not only do we have a huge driver of jobs, but we also, in the tourism industry, create a quality of life that people want to move to, right?
Hmm.
Tied to tourism is the Bank of America Stadium, is the Spectrum Arena, right? Are the
Yeah.
parks that we have available to our residents. So tourism actually enhances the quality of life of the residents, and that also attracts new industry into our area.
It was definitely on my wife and I when we were looking at moving, like I was saying, like over 8 years ago. But for years even before that, it was in our top five, like our top five of
Yeah.
where we would go. And for a lot of these reasons. So that it would make sense that tourism and hospitality drives people, then like they come and visit, they have great experience, and then they start looking around. And then that drives people wanting to move here permanently
Absolutely.
for
Yeah.
overall growth. So
Yeah.
how do you work to advance hospitality and tourism in the region? How do you work to grow that initiative here?
Well, as a team, we go out and we promote the destination as a meeting convention destination and a
Hmm.
sporting event destination. But we also have a team dedicated to driving leisure visitors, right? Leisure
Hmm.
visitation is a big part of that tourism. In fact, one of the number one drivers of visitation is visiting friends and relatives,
Right.
right? So
That
all
was where
these
we
people
fit.
that are
That was
coming
where,
in, right, are
yeah.
actually leisure travel is to come and visit friends and relatives. And then that's oftentimes their first exposure, to the
Yep.
city.
And
So
then we would look for somewhere cool to eat. That would be like the
exactly,
next, and
exactly.
that's
And
on
then
the
that
rise too.
drives hotels, restaurants, and all
Hmm.
the other venues. That's what drive, visitation to museums. It's all
Hmm.
connected. It's all intertwined, right? You think about it, there's 157 net new residents moving to the greater Charlotte area every day. Net from
Another
January,
crazy stat.
157, right? And then in addition to that, the average age of a Charlottean is about 37, right? So it's a very young, vibrant city, which
Yeah.
drives a lot of that excitement that's happening in the area. So overall, our sales team, when it comes to meetings and conventions, we actually do over 64 customer facing activations a year, right? So whether that's a trade show, that's a client activation, some type of an activation that helps us get in front of the customer on a regular basis. These are a lot of the things that we do to drive interest into our destination. And then once we get those opportunities, we are the dot connector. We help facilitate the process that allows us to create a valid and strong proposal for to justify Charlotte as that meeting convention destination. And that is a very much a collaborative approach, especially for citywide and major marquee events. So
I've
all in all,
been
that's what we do.
I've been involved with event production for decades, and I feel like every year a new skill was learned, a new portion of the industry was opened up to me. It's probably you've probably experienced that. When you started doing something, and then your knowledge base just expands. And one of the thing we serve probably half of our businesses in Charlotte region, half out of market. And there are two different mindsets, but only in the last few years did I start really realizing what CVBs are out there. The city is investing on sending talented professionals to sell the location years in advance. And what happens is service providers reap the rewards because clients then come in and then look for those services, like in my example, AV, or might be meeting planning or food and beverage catering or florists or event rental companies.
Sure.
But y'all are out there digging all of those leads up and bringing them to the city, which is an amazing investment for the region. But what do you think if I'm at that point? I mean, I'm the president of MPI this year, MPI Carolina chapter. Only in the last few years did I even start seeing that because I was kind of in my world.
Sure.
But what do you think most planners or even service providers misunderstand about how destinations work with a CVB or how they might work with a CVB?
Yeah. Well, before I answer that, I want to back up and just, one of the things you said is we go out and we find those opportunities. But, that's just the beginning, right? So we find the opportunities, but it's really the collaboration and the partnerships that we have with our hotels, our venues, the restaurants, transportation providers. They're the executors, and they're the ones that ensure that there's a successful event that takes place and leads to that customer or that client wanting to come back to Charlotte, right? So, in regards to planners and the use of CVBs, right? Going back to your question there, there are a lot of event professionals that are actively working with CVBs right now, right? Because they are familiar with, in general, they're familiar with what we do and how we do it, which is the connecting of hotels, venues, and city resources, and even some financial opportunities depending on the program, right? However, there's a lot of event and meeting planners that don't utilize CVBs.
Right. And this amazes me to find out after knowing, after seeing, it's like, oh, well, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Well, and it's a free service. It's a free service, So whether you have, 50 people or you're doing a major marquee event that's going to, just, bring thousands and thousands of people in, destinations like Visit Charlotte have teams dedicated to facilitate and help you execute a successful event, right? So, planners that are utilizing CVBs currently, I think the one thing that they, there might be a misunderstanding is we're not all equal, right? So if I can really quick, so Visit Charlotte, which is a division of the Charlotte Regional Visitors Authority, this is a very unique model in the industry, right? So under the convention, under the CRVA, the Charlotte Regional Convention and Visitor Bureau, You have Visit Charlotte, which is the marketing arm, right? The outside sales reaching arm of the organization. But we also manage and operate the convention center, the Charlotte Convention Center. We manage and operate the NASCAR Hall of Fame. We manage and operate Bojangles Coliseum, Ovens Auditorium. The Charlotte Film Commission is also underneath the Charlotte Regional Visitors Authority. And then we do all the back of the house work at Spectrum, which is where the Charlotte Hornets play. Most destinations are not structured that way. This is very unique. A lot of destinations, you have the CVB, the Visit Charlotte, and they do all the things that we do, but they're handing you over to a completely different partner or entity with their convention center, right? So there's multiple relationships. There's multiple things that you're working through in order to execute, say, a citywide meeting in different destinations.
Yep.
Where at Visit Charlotte or in Charlotte with the Charlotte Regional Visitors Authority, we all have the same leadership. We have the same mission vision, right? We have the same core values. And, when you're working with one of our team members at Visit Charlotte and they're doing an introduction with a team member over at the Charlotte Convention Center, it's a colleague, right? It's not, here's so-and-so with a different entity, but somebody
Right.
within the same entity, right?
Yeah.
Now, granted, it's not that hard of a good luck, have fun. Those destinations work really hard to have those strong relationships with the parties that they need to. And they're very successful in doing that. But because of our model, it really does provide a more seamless and stress-free experience for the meeting planner, but it also ensures a successful execution of their event, especially a complex citywide or marquee event. So it's a very different, but really, if the planner needs to understand that every destination, just because this is the way they did it in, say, Austin or Baltimore or Tampa, right? Those direct competitors we talked about, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the exact same way it would happen in Charlotte. We're funded differently. We're managed differently, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different variables in there. But all that being said, if you're a meeting planner and you're watching this and you're not utilizing a convention and visitor bureau in your efforts, you're missing out. You really, really should take advantage of that.
I think it's eye-opening if you've never, once you realize it, it's like, wow, why was I not? I mean, I was doing it the hard way before because there's so much research that's already been done, so many local resources that are there waiting for you that you would have to figure out yourself. There's really no way you could come up with that as one person in every venue or every location you travel to.
Well, that's exactly. I mean, so if you're a planner and you're looking at 4 different destinations, and Charlotte's one of those destinations, you reach out to the CVB, and let's say it's a citywide event. That destination, we will Visit Charlotte. We will send the RFP out for response. We'll collect all the responses. We'll coordinate that response, and we'll put it into a comprehensive bid package for them to consider, right? Otherwise, not using a CVB, you're calling each individual location independently. You're getting a response from each one of them independently. You're coordinating and collecting all that information, building your own aspect. Think about how much time you would save just by sending one RFP. So if you're working with 4 different destinations, that's 4 RFPs that you're looking at, not 4 times how many locations,
Right.
How many hotels within each one of those destinations.
It could be 100. I mean, it could be crazy.
It's just massive, right?
Yeah.
And that's just a small example of what we can do to help, industry professionals out there.
And I think you said how much time. I think how much time people don't have. Event planning is consistently one of the most stressful jobs you can have. So anything you can do to reduce the friction, anytime you can find an advocate that's there that helps you do your job, absolutely. And then as a planner, you've had the view of how governments support events, but how does government support directly impact planners and producers? As we're looking at state, or I guess city. You're already talking about city because you're working within the city.
Right.
But how does that impact planners and producers?
The state, so really the government really plays more of those, the state government, if you will, plays a key role for like major marquee events, really, really big stuff, right? So at the state level, they have not-for-profit submission that you could take advantage of if you are a not-for-profit organization, right? If you're an esport executor, right? If you're somebody that that does esports and organize esports competition, there is a state grant where people can apply to have monies to help offset esport competition. And then there's also a state funding grant that can be submitted for major marquee events that are taking place in stadiums and arenas, right? So those are kind of some of the state government level activations that they can have. But working with your local convention and visitor bureau, we're kind of that dot connector, right, on getting those services available and connected, and even navigating whether or not they are something that you would even qualify for, right?
Yeah. Okay. So let me just repeat, just before we go any farther, from a state perspective, I guess periodically the state gets together and figures on a macro scale. Obviously North Carolina's thought esports is something they really want. So they'll say like this, or, 50,000 people, or a major soccer tournament, or, a global soccer tournament, things like that. They defer then to the region or the city for other events.
That's right.
And that's where you come in and your team would come in to help.
Right. We know that those are resources that are available. Right. Where somebody that's looking to do a major event, sporting event in one of these stadiums may or may not know it's available. Right. And that's the benefit of working with us. There's also state funding through the film. They have film commission assets that they can take advantage of. Right. So working with our Charlotte Film Commission, we know what those opportunities are, and we can help connect those dots as well. I think a really good example of an event that we have coming in August, where it comes to how we helped in the collaboration of making this event work. And it not just touched Visit Charlotte, right, and our venues, but it also, our city council was involved with this, our mayor was involved with this, and they received state funding for this through the major event fund, because they're utilizing the Spectrum Arena for this event. But in August, we're hosting the 41st Stellar Gospel Awards, Music Awards. So this is basically, think of it as the Grammys, but for gospel music.
Love it.
Right.
Love it.
So this effort was a very collaborative effort at local and state levels. And as we went through that process, the organizers of this event saw a cohesive effort to earn their opportunity, which is at the end of the day, one of the things that allowed us to win the business. I liken it to when you're doing a site visit, you have a customer that comes in, the more people they meet through that process, the more confident they are to do business with you, right?
Sure.
So I call it buying confidence. Anything that we can do to ensure buying confidence is always going to be a win. And in this situation, it really presented a strong buying confidence with the folks organizing the Stellar Awards because of the collaborative approach that we had at the local and state level.
Okay, so that's an exciting opportunity for the city. You have this event that brings a lot of press attention and really global attention to the city. So I could understand how the city would really work hard to make that happen. But I also believe that you're running a team that would do the same for something that is only important to the people that are organizing it and the attendees.
That's right.
So if a meeting planner is putting together package, like they're trying to find a city and they want to make their event as attractive as possible so that they can get all the city support that they can. What makes an event attractive from an economic development perspective?
No, it's a great question. And really, I think the easiest way of answering this is if you're a meeting planner in your RFP, we already know you're going to put how many rooms you need, what's the square footage, right? What are your functions that you're doing, total number of attendees. But oftentimes we don't see them telling the story of the economic impact that their program could have on the destination or at the hotel level, right? So whether it's a one hotel piece of business or a major citywide, I would absolutely encourage you, if you're not including data, if you're not including your research of what the value of your meeting is in your RFP process, you absolutely should, right? So specifically as a city, if it's a citywide event, right? As a city, we're looking at, what's the local economic impact that the piece of business is going to have, right? Because we tie that to what kind of jobs are going to be supported by this piece of business coming to the area, right? We also look at what is the general visitation? How many people are going to be exposed to our destination? And many of them might be a first time to Charlotte, right? Which we already talked about. What happens? You come, you visit, you fall in love, and you end up moving here, right? Right. So that's a big part of it. So, as a meeting planner, think about what are the key measurement indicators? What are your key KPIs that you want to make sure you're talking to or telling the story about in your RFP? I think there is historical pickup, right? We know how much you need, but what's your performance been, with the history of the meeting? If you have history, include that. Total attendance, we already talked about. Length of stay plays a big part of that, right? Because the length of stay means more economic impact, right? That drives a part of it. And then if it's a repeat piece of business, talk about what is the direct economic impact that your program has had in other destinations, right? This meeting, whether it's a citywide or a single hotel piece of business, you can tell the story about the economic impact that your program has on a destination, whether it's an estimated or a direct. If you have strong meeting history, direct economic impact tells an amazing story of the value. So if you're looking at a one hotel piece of business, it's going to be, date, space, rates, availability, all those things are in there, right? But talk about what your ancillary expenditure is. Are your attendees big bar users? Right. Is there going to be sponsored events that are going to be above and beyond your planned programming? Outline that in your RFP because it creates value into what you're doing for that one hotel. Right. Same thing with the citywide, just at a bigger level. Right. Identifying all the different aspects of what your program has to offer.
So
really
telling a
tells the
story, tell the story of the event and data. You want to know data, and that will inform your CVB team working with you. Also, I would imagine that stimulates ideas too.
It absolutely does, right? Doing that, when you have data in there, it automatically creates a foundation of trust, right? We're not hiding anything. Here we are, right? So you're building trust, right? It allows the destination to really understand the true values, so therefore they can create a much more comprehensive and realistic bid package for the meeting planner as well. And at the end of the day, it also aligns the partnership, right? It allows for better collaboration and communication between the two parties, which ultimately allows for a more successful event, right? Opening up more collaborative conversations, understanding that this is what you would like to do, but this is what we can do, right? And seeing how we can mirror those opportunities to where the outcome is still going to be beneficial for all parties.
Love it. Yeah. It's a relationship. You need information to figure out how to help them. And I think that's a wonderful way of putting it. I do want to switch gears here a little bit because I want to make sure to touch on this because I think you have some thoughts on it. But you and I both probably have lived through several economic downturns in our
Mm,
industry at different
yeah.
points over the last few decades. It's just, the economy is cyclical, but in those periods, what have you learned? Where does our industry need to be louder and more unified to making our case known,
Yeah.
especially when things like, oh, I'll just give you an example. There's a global pandemic or a
Sure.
giant housing collapse, and they're starting to bail certain industries out and certain industries are being ignored. How
Yeah.
can we do this better?
Our industry has come a long way in doing this, but I think the number one thing is advocacy. Advocacy, advocacy, right? We have to do a better job as an industry to tell our story.
Mm,
We have to um, make sure that everybody understands the economic impact that we have, but also beyond what just the direct impact is with tourism, what all our industry does
yeah,
as a big picture. So, like an example of this, if meetings and conventions are what drive industry standards,
hmm,
right? They drive problem solving, right? They drive all these different aspects that allow us to be successful in all industries, right? I
hmm,
mean, think about all the industry standards that happen at all different industries. They come from meetings that have taken place, from getting all these industry
that's
experts
right.
together to create standards, right?
Hmm,
It didn't happen over a Zoom, didn't
right.
happen over a memo. It happened over face to face conversation, right? So that talks to how the meeting industry just impacts the overall everything that we do, right?
Yes.
Globally, right?
Agreed. I
You,
mean, you got the standard piece. You've got lots of industries have institutional knowledge that gets passed down
hmm.
in person, mentorship, relationships happen in
Oh yeah.
person, peers supporting each other
Hmm.
in person. All of us learn that this is very difficult if it's like a virtual first environment or virtual only environment. It's very difficult because we saw that the virtual meeting thing that happened several years ago, the formal meeting is fine, but so much happens in the in between,
Oh,
walking to the next
that's the
meeting
key.
or yes. And it's the in person in between times.
Yes. I mean, so when you're going to a meeting, you're going to specific education. You're going to the things that make you think, right?
Yes.
But it's those connections that happen in between the two sessions or over
Hmm.
dinner
Yep.
or over a reception. Those are ultimately what really creates all the things that we talked about, right?
Hmm.
Again, the setting of the standards, the influencing policy
Yeah.
come through face-to-face meeting, and it drives innovation as a whole, right? One of the things that I also want to talk about, our hospitality industry also is a huge job creator and
Mm.
drives and develops our future leaders, those that are in our industry. And I would argue that those that are in the hospitality industry are creating a skill set that is more transferable to any other industry in um,
Agreed.
out there, right? So
Hmm.
the people skills that we learn working as a server or a front desk agent, those build the skills that you need to work in whatever industry you want to work in, right? And
Yeah.
that's
High
all
pressure
available in the
people skills.
hospitality. Yeah, it's all
Hmm.
available in the hospitality industry. You talked about like some of the journeys, right?
Hmm.
And let's do the financial crash in 2008. I
Yeah.
mean, everybody talks about the pandemic. I feel like we've talked it to death. So
To death.
we'll
Yeah.
go
Sure.
way back in history in 2008. But this was really the foundation of where we started being proactive in our advocacy as an industry. So in 2008, our industry was really caught flat-footed.
Mm.
There was a financial crash that was happening, and there was a message that was being given to stop doing meetings, right? Specifically, like incentive meetings were kind of getting a bad rap,
Right.
right? So it was like, stop going to meetings, stop doing meetings. And that was just the messaging that was happening, wrong or
Hmm.
right. Well, a group of industry professionals came together. Well, industry organizations came together. Meeting Professional International, which I think you had mentioned you're
Hmm.
a president of, right? MPI
Yeah,
was one.
absolutely. Hmm.
Um, they all came together. U.S. Travel, I think, was one. Destinations International was engaged with it, but they all came together and they did a study with PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Hmm.
And at the time of that study, it was found that the GDP in the meetings industry alone, not in tourism, but just the meetings industry, that the GDP was greater in the meetings industry than in the automotive industry. And in 2008, they were
Amazing.
bailing out the automotive industry. They were giving them money to keep them alive, but yet at the same time, they were telling people not to meet,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And had we had that information, had we been proactive, we could have told that story really quick. And that group that did that study ultimately created GMID, Global Meetings Industry Day, which takes place
Hmm.
in May. May 6th, I believe, is the day of Meetings Industry Day, right?
That's right.
And GMID is our opportunity as an industry to talk about the importance of what we do and why we do what we do and what it does for the state as well as for the government and the United States of America when it drives the economic impact. And that's just the meetings side of things. That has nothing to do with all the other aspects of tourism. It's just meetings and conventions. But being a better
Amazing.
advocate is one of the things that we need to do overall is to continue to be proactive and not reactive. And I think that's one of the reasons why we were able to come out of COVID as quick as we did. You know, we kept telling our story. I
Hmm.
also think that COVID made people realize just how important those tourism assets were to them because they didn't have access to them, right?
Right. Right. There was a
So,
ton of pent up demand for sure,
yes, yes,
which just shows that how important it is. And I love that story that it's not discounting the manufacturing side or automotive industry.
no,
It's just highlighting that they were cutting in the wrong place. You know,
that's
this
right.
is a very powerful industry, a driver of revenue in our country. And we need to understand that as players in that industry so that I think advocacy happens on an individual level too. You know, it's all the
Yeah,
little conversations that
sure.
formulate people's decision making ability, you know, that are actually making policy, that they hear
Right.
hundreds of arguments over the last few years for why they should not ignore this
You,
industry.
you know, Seth, it's a great example because you know we talked a little bit about this, but you know, one out of every nine people in Mecklenburg County are employed
Right.
in the hospitality industry. So it's a job creator, right?
That's right.
And the tax revenues that are brought in as a result of tourism activation saves every Mecklenburg County resident over $350 in annual taxes.
That's amazing.
Plus, plus they're getting access to Bank of America Stadium,
Hmm.
right? To to um, to the Spectrum Arena and all these other
All
amazing
the facilities
assets.
you mentioned that you
Right.
guys manage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You know, one of the things we talked about our partnership with government. I need to back up because it's more than just a partnership with the state government. And I missed that. And I really need to pause and readdress that if I
Yeah,
can.
please.
You know, those partnerships and collaborations are very, very, very important. And, you know, when you think about major sporting events, right, we collaborate very closely with Tepper Entertainment, Tepper Sports
Hmm.
Entertainment. We work very closely with the Charlotte Hornets and the bank and the Spectrum Arena, and
Hmm.
we also work hand in hand with the Charlotte Sports Foundation to attract major events. So I want to talk a little bit about marquee events and why this is important. So let's use the NBA men's basketball March Madness, which just happened,
Hmm.
right? So not only does the ACC basketball event have tremendous economic impact while they're here, but
Hmm.
events like that also elevate the city of Charlotte as a destination for major events above and beyond just the city, right?
Yeah.
These are national, if not global, activations that we can do that put Charlotte in the spotlight. And doing that elevates who we are,
Hmm.
what we can do, right? Which attracts other marquee events in addition to like a basketball tournament like ACC,
Hmm.
NBA All Star we've
Yeah,
hosted,
that event
right?
was massive.
Right. And so that was because we were successful in hosting other events
Hmm.
like an NBA All Star, right? And the DNC, RNC, all of these
Hmm.
major events, right? These are very huge collaborative. And at the end of the day, we can go out and we can sell these destinations, but really where the rubber hits the road is the collaborative partnerships that we have with our hotel community, with our restaurant community, the transportation providers. All those things are what allow us to deliver memorable and successful events in our location. But those marquee events are absolutely key, and those partnerships are very important because they do elevate us into a national and global spotlight, which not only drives tourism, but also drives investment. And it gets people that are interested in relocating a company. Hey, never
Hmm.
thought about Charlotte. Looks like a great place. Let me look at that. Right.
Right.
And so it does a lot more than just tourism economics. It really, truly drives economic development to the region. So thank you for
Absolutely.
letting me back up on that.
Absolutely. This greater cultural conversation, it
Yeah.
keeps the name of Charlotte in people's minds and drives all sorts of wonderful things for the region, which is why it's important. It's funny because you're kind of at this intersection of reality and abstract thought. Like you have to kind of because some of the stuff that you're talking about, it does impact all these things, but you have to be a little abstract in how you think about it. But it is totally true. So,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
example, when I was a little kid growing up in Orlando, I loved the idea of the city of Charlotte even then because of the basketball team here, and it just shows that like city branding has weight,
It's
like
huge.
over lifetimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. When people understand that tourism and meetings drive jobs, support businesses, strengthen the community, the hospitality industry is recognized as a true foundation of economic growth and
Hmm.
opportunity. And that's the advocacy story that we need to tell. So, but you have to make sure you're using the same words that are used in other economic development conversations, right?
Yeah, yeah, that other industries would be using.
That's
Yep.
right, because that's where the politicians hone in on job
Hmm.
creation,
Right.
right? We
Those are the buzzwords
employ
they want to
people, right?
know.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's our responsibility when advocating that we're using the same terminology that they look at when it comes to overall economic development and driving new job creation in the region, state, and country.
Right. That's a really good point. And all that to say, it's not that you're trying to pull a fast one. It's the truth. It's getting people to see in the same way that they compare it to the automotive industry. We drive the same amount, if not more, revenue
Mhm.
through this region than this industry, but they're just better at telling their story. So hey man, it always comes back to telling your story, whether you're trying to pitch an event to a city or whether you're selling the city itself or
That's
all
right.
those things.
That's right.
So
That's right.
how early? I know we were talking before we started here, before I hit record. But how early should planners engage with the destination or the
You
CVB?
can never start too early. You can
Well, there
never
you have it.
start too early, right? Listen, building relationships is the foundation to success, right?
Hmm.
You and I were chatting about this a little bit, but if you really think about it, everything you do, everything you buy, all that your people buy people. People buy
Hmm.
people first, right?
Yeah, love that.
If you're looking to buy a car and you go to a car dealership and you don't click with that person,
I'm
odds
out.
are you're not going to buy a car from that
Yep,
person, right?
that's
Or
true.
that dealership. You'll go to
Hmm.
another dealership to do it. But if you walk into that dealership and you build a trusting rapport with that person, you'll probably end up buying a car and maybe even something that's not exactly what you want, right?
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
like with that person, right?
That's right.
Even groceries, right? The example I think I gave earlier was like, if you think about it, if you go to your local grocery store and let's say you had a bad experience with a clerk that was working the register, and that clerk is at the register and you're getting ready to check out. If you know you had a bad experience with them, you're either going to look for a different clerk or you're going to go to self checkout. But
Right.
that personal interaction changed your buying habit, right? So building relationships are key,
Yep.
right? They establish trust, it engages and enhances collaboration. It's all the things, right? So
Especially when all things are equal, it becomes the competitive advantage.
absolutely. Well, it's a big part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our job as sales leaders in the industry is to ultimately become the trusted advisor, Seth, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm doing the best I can, I'm going to have event planners reach out to me, and whether or not I can accommodate them or not, they know they can reach out to me because if I can, I'm going to do whatever we can to earn the business, right? To where it makes sense for both parties, right? But that's the
Mm-hmm.
relationship that we've established.
But they
But
also know that if you can't,
that's
you'll tell them.
right.
Yeah,
If
that's right.
they will know that if I can't, that I will connect them with someone who I trust that I
Mm-hmm.
know will take care of them, right?
Yep.
And when you're able to do that, that's the top of the pyramid when it comes to sales, if you will, is
Mm-hmm.
to become that trusted advisor, right?
Yeah.
But in order to do that, you have to build a relationship. So, going back to working with CVBs, find the time to build and work on a relationship with your local CVB representatives and find out who your contact would be within the CVB. It's
Mm-hmm.
extremely important, right? Strong relationships, and those relationships will allow you to identify creative solutions. It'll allow you to connect planners to the right partners because you really
Mm-hmm.
understand what they're looking for and what they do or don't like, right? And it will also ensure that you're connecting them with the right resources that they need to be successful, not just through the bid process, but really through the overall activation of the event, right? And
Right.
it's so much easier to do that if you're starting to build a relationship earlier than right when you send the RFP and you need the support,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, this probably has happened to you tons of times, but we deal with it farther down the line than you do for sure. But there's been groups that have come through Charlotte. We weren't the right fit. The next year, we were the right fit, but we
Yeah,
built the relationship
that's
during
right.
the no cycle. And I think the cities probably deal with that too. They're like, hey, we came and looked at it. It's not right for us for this, but I'm going to either bring it back next year or I have another client where it
That's
is a
right.
fit.
Yeah.
So it is a
Yeah.
relationship thing, and it's
I,
just sometimes it's just not the right time.
I've got a great example of the importance of a relationship. So, National Propane Gas Association is a really good example.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've had a relationship with the meeting planner for National Propane Gas Association for over 2 decades.
Long time
But she
relationship.
was not always with the National Propane Gas Association.
Right.
And through that relationship, when she joined the National Propane Gas Association, she said, you know what, this would be a good fit for Charlotte. So we started working together and collaborating on seeing if we could make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
As a result of that relationship, we got a 2-year deal with National Propane Gas, and we're now working to be in a permanent rotation with that organization. But
Yep.
that relationship started when the person wasn't even with National Propane Gas, but it was
That's right.
through those relationships and through the collaboration that we have already experienced. That was what allowed us to be successful in winning National Propane Gas into the city of Charlotte. And prior to that, the relationship with that customer was really just a relationship. We had done no business together prior
Yep.
to
Yep.
that, right? But when the opportunity was right, we were ready because of the relationship that it took. And, the timeline, and that's the difference between hospitality industry, and we used the car industry earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It's, we try not to be a transaction.
Absolutely.
It's a relationship. It's a collaboration. We always look at Visit Charlotte. Whenever we have an opportunity to work with a partner, we're now an extension, or with the planner, we're now an extension of their team, right? We are now entering into a partnership with them, and it's not just the selling of a good. And that ties that relationship.
I love this. I think it's the difference between, there's a reason why you're using the car, kind of like the used car sales idea that everyone has. That is a very transactional relationship versus relational sales. And I think that's the lesson in this industry. And one of the reasons I love it is when you get down to it, it's a small niche industry. You end up knowing a lot of people.
Yeah.
They bounce between organizations. And I've had relationships where at one point I'm working for them, another point they're working for me. Sometimes we're working together throughout decades, so it's, number one, don't burn bridges. And number two, it's a long game relational thing. And
that's right.
If you feel like you're in this transactional thing and you're trying to force something, don't do that. Just, know that you're building long-term relationships. It'll come back in some way, shape, or form. That's usually how it works.
And you will build a strong rapport by being honest and upfront than if you try to put a square peg in a round hole, because that makes no one win, right? And if anything, it'll sever any type of relationship. I also want to make a note. I know a lot of good car salespeople that do build relationships. So I was being very general.
And that's why I'm trying to word it of it's not fair, because they're really good car salesmen too.
There
but
are
the
some.
methodology is what we're...
And he was fantastic, right?
Yeah.
And, it's the second vehicle we've got from them.
Yeah.
But that was because of the relationship that they built with us.
I'll give you an example. I went to buy a used car once. I had cash. I was like, I'm going to buy this little SUV. It's used, and I've got cash. It's all I have to spend. I told them that at the beginning. They took me in a little room and talked to me for no less than 2 hours, trying to beat me down on price. Got to the price. I'm like, I got cash. This is what I got. Then he brought his manager in and told me they couldn't let it go for $200 more than what we had agreed on. And I was like, no. I started to get up and he goes, I just had to check. And I'm like, I feel so dirty.
Right?
Why are you doing this to me? It's so disrespectful. That's what I'm talking about. But not everybody is like that.
Truth. Yeah. Truth.
Okay. Couple more real quick questions for you before I let you go. What does the dream planner look like from your side?
Dream planner, organized, communicative, right? Good communication skills, collaborative, willing to look at things and be in it together in the process, right? Again, successful relationships are built in those strong relationships, right? So the partnership is a very important part of it. That partnership will drive the collaboration, and it will ensure that the event is not only successful, but also executed well, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important for the planner. We talked about data, right? So, making sure that they're upfront with the information, that they share clear goals of what their program is going to be, timeline, right? What's the decision timeline? I'm collecting RFPs from here. I'm planning on doing site shortlisting here. I'm planning on doing site visits here. I'm planning on making a decision there. That's huge information.
Have all their milestones listed out.
Yeah. Setting the expectations, right? Setting the expectations being, upfront, and, identifying what's important to them. What are the deal and no deal things, right? You get a list of concessions sometimes. If I get a list of more than 10 concessions, I'm going to ask them to prioritize it. I want to know what your top 5 are.
That doesn't help narrow it down at all. Yeah.
Right. So if you tell me what your top 5 are, then that tells me what I really need to work on and see if I can accommodate. But if you just throw 10 or 20 out, I might say no to the ones that were the most important to you, but I don't know that. Right.
That's right.
Because of your list of concessions. So, that communication. I think the other thing is that they realize and recognize the value of what our team can do for them. right?
Okay. Yeah. They get it.
And they approach it as an opportunity of collaboration. Now, one thing that we do not do and we can't do is negotiate contracts. We don't
Right.
negotiate contracts and we don't negotiate disputes. That is between the planner and the organization itself, right? That they're
Got it. Which
contracting
makes
with.
sense. Makes
Yep.
sense. You can bring them the connections, but you can't complete the deal because
Yep.
you're not speaking for that organization.
That's right. That's right. But at the end of the day, it's a team effort, and working together, we can absolutely, accomplish a lot. But that would be my dream planner.
Okay. I love the dream planner. And then what types of events is Charlotte, North Carolina actively trying to attract right now?
All right.
Is that a safe question to ask?
I can give you one example of one that we're actively working to account because I believe it did go public. But then I also want to talk to you about one that we have coming up that's really important. All right.
Cool. Love it.
All right. So one that's coming up, and this is also one of those mega events that we worked collaboratively on with local and state government. But we are pursuing hosting the NBA All-Stars again.
Love it. Love it.
So we're very excited about working on getting that bid package together and presented. So we're actively working on trying to see if we can welcome them back to Charlotte. Quite a bit has changed since 2019 when we hosted them last. It was a
for sure.
huge opportunity. So we are working very closely with the Charlotte Sports Foundation and the Hornets, who are taking lead on this opportunity. But we are working hand in hand with them to make sure that we provide the best bid package we can in hopes of welcoming them back in a future year.
Love it. That's a very cool piece of news right there.
Yeah. So, all right, one that I'm excited about that's coming, and I think it's very important to talk about, is the American Society of Association Executives, their annual meeting. So ASAE. So ASAE is the association for associations, right?
Yeah, that's a big event.
It's going to bring over 5,000 people to our city in August in 2027. And 25% of the executives that are coming to ASAE are actively looking to place their own annual meeting in the next 5 years of attending that meeting. So not only will ASAE have a huge, millions of economic impact while hosting, but it's hundreds of millions of economic impact opportunities after they've left because of all the people that are there that are actively looking to place their next annual meeting into a destination. And a lot of these executives either have their own perception of Charlotte that is wrong or have never been to Charlotte, right? Or the last time they were in Charlotte was 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And candidly, if you haven't been to Charlotte in the past 5 years, you haven't been to Charlotte because it's a completely different destination. So very, very excited about hosting ASAE in 2027. And I had to put that plug in.
I can't think of a bigger win for what you and your group are trying to accomplish because everyone you would be talking to, you get to come and host and show them in real life.
That's right.
What your event could look like. That's amazing.
It's the Super Bowl of the meetings industry.
Right. And people living here would never even know that's happening.
And if you're a NASCAR fan, it's the Daytona 500. Like it's a big
Daytona
deal
500, man.
of the meetings industry, right? So
I love it. Well, congratulations on winning that piece of business. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
We internally have been talking about that too.
Yeah, we won that in 2019, talking about relationships. Right.
Big, huge, long sales cycles. That's crazy.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I have learned a ton. If someone wanted to get a hold of you and learn more about you, what you're doing, or the city of Charlotte, where should they?
Absolutely. Listen, the easiest way to get in touch with me is probably through LinkedIn. Would love to connect with you. Send me a LinkedIn request. Make a note that you found me through the podcast, so that way I know how our introduction was created. But happy to be a resource any way I can. I really appreciate you inviting us to be a part of your podcast, Seth. And hopefully it's been entertaining for you as well as those that'll be watching.
I feel honored that you took an hour of your day to talk with me about what you do. I think that's amazing, and I've learned a lot. So thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure's mine.
Well, thank you for joining us too on this episode of the Event Pro Show. If you liked this episode, we have a whole backlog of guests that have joined us that are all talented like Ned and touch corporate events in some way, shape, or form. And you can listen to that at theeventproshow.com. Thank you so much for taking a little of your time today and spending it with us. And we will see you on the next one. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Take care.
The Event Pro Show is a production of LEMG, video by Nick Barrett, audio and post-production by Prince Thompson. You can learn more about us at lemg.live.